Well, Cameron Wurf, welcome. Good to talk to you.
Thanks for having me, mate. Yeah, we've tried to put this together for a couple of weeks. I think I've crossed almost every continent on the planet and managed to miss you a bunch of times. So yeah, great to finally see you again.
Well, you're you're
Mm.
you're a busy man. It has been a few years. You're a busy man because you've been racing professional, endurance sports for over 20 years. 20
Yeah.
years ago, you were at the Athens Olympics rowing. Then
Mm.
you crossed over from there into pro cycling, and now you're at the top of the tree in triathlon in Ironman. Just recently, seventh at Kona, the World
Hmm.
Championships. Worthy, unbelievable. How do you keep going?
Well, I guess I change my mind a lot, and that kind of keeps things fresh, doesn't it? They say that I guess once you get around 30, you start to wane a bit with your enthusiasm and motivation to do the same thing you've been doing for a long time. But I've never stuck at anything for that long, so it's always new and fresh. And I honestly feel like I'm still improving in Ironman, and I guess I mean, the truth of it is, I might not ever be as good as I could have been had I have started when I was 25. But I still believe I can be better than I've ever been in the sport, and I'm towards the top. So why not believe I can be the best? So yeah, it's the mental part. It keeps you going. It's the body will do it, but it's between your ears. It's the biggest challenge.
Well, let's speak a little bit about the body stuff because I find that really interesting. And what we're going to talk a little bit about today is how important do you think is high altitude training for endurance athletes?
Well, I mean, it's crazy, isn't it? It's like creatine, or bicarb.
Mm.
That stuff's older than us, which is old, since we first came into sport, and it was the thing back then. And even same with altitude tents and things like that. But it's obviously had a massive resurgence recently,
Mm.
which has sort of come about from, I guess, yeah, the end of the doping era, has been a great thing for for endurance sports, obviously
Yeah,
on a
yeah.
range of fronts, because all of a sudden guys have to use everything possible to get the most out of themselves, and I guess when the EPO era hit, which, fortunately we kind of missed, but the yeah, that I guess the altitude need for a lot of the top athletes kind of. I mean, they've been proven to be guilty. They've all admitted it, whatever. So I don't think we're breaking any breaking stories here. But there wasn't that need to do that because they could get it from synthetic means and obviously get the training benefits that way. Now I'm a big believer in the fact that the sport, you can be competitive at it clean, and as such, I think athletes are turning to every possible means to get the most out of themselves. And I think it's fantastic that it's the basics of 20, 30 years ago that have come into the fore again. As I said, you just name those three products: creatine, bicarb, and altitude. You know how to use those things properly. That's
Mm.
probably about as much as performance enhancing sport goes these days, which is fantastic. Mm.
Well, I'm really glad you sort of brought that up in that way because it's exactly what happened throughout my career. As you said, we crossed over for a little while. There was this exploration back again into these old school training methods where we went at to altitude. We didn't really understand how to do it properly, but as it sort of adjusted, everyone started to learn a little bit more about how to use altitude.
Mm.
Worthy, tell me a little bit of your experience and how other athletes are using high altitude these days.
Yeah, I mean that's the big thing of it is our understanding and knowledge of how to use it. I think that period, remember, it was all told you had
Mm.
if you go up there, you got to take it easy, you got to have 5 days easy, blah blah
Yeah.
blah, or 10 days, whatever. You got to decrease the training volume. Well, I've obviously been fortunate enough, with the Ironman and with Nike, and I'm exposed to the highest level there. I'm coached by Brett Kirby, who, was one of the originators of the Breaking Two concept. So had a lot of involvement with all of their top runners, obviously most notably Eliud Kipchoge. And when you look at the way runners use altitude, it's more that they're restricted by their breathing, and their heart rate. So, and that actually kind of slows them down a fraction, because if they go and try and run 250 pace all the time, they're going to get injured. Whereas because of the high altitude, they're still running at 180 heart rate, but the difference is they're running at like 310 or 305, a pace that's actually quite comfortable for them. But the relative effort, they're still working at their VO2 max. And we would think think that we had to go easy. And I think that was wrong. And I think that methodology is slowly, we started to hear things about, I remember back with, I think it was, which sprinter, it might have been John Dagenkolb or something. I remember reading something many years ago, him going to altitude, or Marcel Kittel, and they were flat out sprinting and doing all this strength work. And it was like, wow, what's going on here? I thought it was the Tour de France champions that were meant to be doing altitude, not a sprinter. And I think that kind of then fed to, well, if they can train as hard as possible at altitude, why can't the endurance athletes also train at their normal, or close to their normal power numbers up there? But, let the whatever the natural decrease in power happens to be, but working in the same, heart rate zone, be more the guide. And, from the feedback you hear now, all altitude training is basically done at what they'll do in the race. But their ability to do it in those conditions means that in the race, they're able to do it more effectively, so they can just do that same kind of effort more often, which is quite fascinating.
Well, one of the things that we both discovered, and you just alluded to then, was there was quite a lot of restraints about high altitude when we were doing it in the beginning. You had to go to the top of a mountain. You had to stay up there for a long period of time. Something very exciting has happened. Tell me about box altitude, the arrival of high altitude right to your home.
Yeah, I think that's probably been a big part of the change in the attitude towards altitude training, because the technology of that all those years ago, as you remember, we probably all tried an altitude tent at some point. It was hot, it was uncomfortable, it was noisy. Your wife or your girlfriend or whoever it was definitely didn't want to sleep in it. You basically had to take yourself off to a camp and lug everything to the top of a mountain, or have a team that was very organized that did it. And then the cost of it, so that was a bit restrictive of how long you could spend up there. Not everyone can afford to stay in a hotel for months on end. And yet the science was also at the same time coming out that this live high, train low concept was optimal, which is why, Tade, in Tenerife, has been such a popular place for the best cyclists for a long period of time now. The ability to train at sea level, but also, easily ride back, well, not easily, but ride back up and sleep at the top of the hill. So the concept over the past few years of live low live high, sorry, but train low, has really, or even to be more precise, sleep high and live low. I think that's the term I was actually looking for. So that means you're basically sleeping and getting the benefits, but all your recovery is done at sea level. So you're recovering optimally after training. You have your massage, you go to the grocery store. I've spent a lot of time at Big Bear Lake, for example, which is actually a proper town. There's not a lot of those in Europe where you can sort of be up there. St. Moritz is probably one where guys would train, or Livigno, but where you go to the grocery store, you go to restaurants, and you tend to just get tired from just being there because of all that part. Every time you go anywhere, it's an extra stress on the system. Whereas this concept of living low, but sleeping high, you can train like a madman, like you normally would at sea level. You can go and do all those things at normal, so it's not a huge extra stress on your body. And but then you can get the benefits of sleeping there, which means that you've just got more energy when you go out and train the next day. And so the big thing about what Box Altitude has done, they've really made that whole sleeping in a tent or converting a room, to a very pleasant experience. Personally, my experience has been I often sleep better in the tent, because I don't know why. I just do. We all love camping. It's often some of the best night's sleep you've ever had as a kid. And I guess, obviously it's the science involved with what Rico Rogers has done with the technology. And that's obviously the most commonly used device now, out there for athletes. And it's definitely been a game changer for for endurance sport. Well, I think for any sport. I know the swimmers use it extensively. The sprint swimmers. They're only racing for 21 seconds. Cam McAvoy. So it's not like it only helps a guy that's riding the Tour de France or doing an Ironman. It's across all sports.
Well, I think you made a great point there, and this is something that you said right at the start of this interview: is that it's all between the ears, and this is what box altitude is able to do. It's keep you in your home environment, things that you
Mhm.
love to do, love to catch up
Mm,
with friends, you like to, hang out with your family, be with your wife, be around your dog, whatever it is. You go
yeah,
to altitude in Europe, you're on the side of a mountain. That's a novelty for a little part of the time, but it
yeah,
gets old very quick. So to be able
mm,
to do your old roads, your old training roads, come home, still get that effect from altitude.
yeah.
And, I think keep that mentality. Like you said, you've still got another 10, 12 years left of your career. You need to keep yourself fresh
Yeah.
mentally. And it's about that getting the
Mhm.
altitude as easy as possible in the best
Yeah.
possible way, but mentally
Yeah.
staying on top of your game.
Yeah, not only that, Mitch, but when you go to a location, you're stuck at that location. I mean, that might
Mm,
be Stelvio, which is crazy high, or Livigno, which is obviously much lower, or St. Moritz, Big Bear Lake. I mean, there's, Colorado. I mean, we could name obviously Tenerife for 2,000 meters. The beauty of the tent, I mean, the system can go anywhere up to, I think, 5,000 meters. So you actually have the ability to, and that's, I think, where it'll progress to going forward. I know Rico's very passionate about this part of it, is being able to optimally adjust the altitude to get the most benefit for each individual athlete. For me, it might be sleeping at 1,000 meters. Maybe I'm not really fit enough to be that high, but it could be sleeping at 3,000 meters or 2,500 meters, or it could be you scale it up to get more of a boost and bang for your buck, and then obviously you get out of it when you go to competition. Like, I can see it getting very refined, and obviously with that you can't do that when you're on top of a mountain because you're just stuck
yeah,
at whatever that height is. So I think the benefits, is only going to progress. And I mean, I know we're prattling on about Rico's system here, but the reality is he's leading the game at the moment, and a long way ahead of anyone else. And he's sort of already, looking at these things. So it's yeah, I mean, it's quite an exciting time. And then, of course, the move into general health. I mean, there's
mm,
huge. I remember, Aldo Sassi, rest in peace, obviously, but he was sleeping in an altitude tent all through his, a brain cancer therapy.
mm,
There's a lot of data for just, well, for medical reasons, but also just general performance. I mean, I've heard a lot of movie stars and things setting up rooms in their house just to be better performance, just be
yeah,
more, have more energy, be able to do their shows, do their acting, print their lines. They think clearer because everything's just easier. Yeah, it's amazing that even the Gen Pop, it's not just the
no.
athlete that's prepared to put themselves through sleeping in a tent for a couple of weeks could find a use for, or will find a use for this. I think it'll become much more widely used in society in general.
Well, just tell us about those different systems there. You've got the sleep cloud, which is the tent that you set up in your room. You've also got the
Yeah,
training cloud, but the optimum is the altitude bedroom system.
yeah,
Three different systems, three slightly different areas as well, but
yeah.
they all work from home.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you can, the dream is to do the one in your house because it's what he's been able to do, which is really pretty,
Yeah,
revolutionary. Is any air conditioning technician can install it because it basically comes through the same ducting, and it's the same mounting sort of system outside the house, and same sort of requirements of where you'd have one, power, usage, etc. So you don't hear it. That it's very clean, and the environment was very much like just being on top of a mountain. You walk into a bedroom and you shut the door and you go to sleep. I mean, personally, I've got a room that also has an ensuite attached to it, so I can, be very comfortable in there all the night. I don't have to open the main door at all. And yeah, it's seamless. I mean,
mm,
when you use it enough, you barely even notice that you're walking into it. You obviously just notice it in your performance and your ability to just be better, to be better every day. So, and if for people that are in a home base, I mean, that's certainly what we're seeing with the team sports, the
mm.
football, soccer, whatever we want to call it. Obviously, I know in the AFL there's starting to be more use of it. Guys can just do a room in their house because that's where they live, and so whereas a tent, that's a bit of a tough sell.
Yeah.
Geraint Thomas. He sort of said his little boy loved it. It was like camping with him, and he'd go in there. But I don't think Sarah's wife's too keen. But yeah, my wife definitely isn't going anywhere near the tent, so that's a bit of a harder sell.
Well, tell me,
Can
Worthy, look,
manage to do
because
the room, it's certainly the optimal.
that is the optimal to have in there. You wouldn't even
Yeah.
notice it. You go into your room, you've got all your normal belongings there. But tell me, you're talking about these
Mm.
athletes as well. You've spoken about swimming, you've spoken about the running, also about pro cyclists. You're talking about people who are using it, but we're not hearing a lot about it. Why are we not hearing a lot about athletes talk about it? What is it? Is they don't want to tell anyone about it? What's why are we not hearing many athletes talk about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit like the use of ketones. It was something we always knew was there, but no one wanted to talk about it. I mean, it was because everyone knew that they were probably getting some benefit. They probably really didn't know exactly what benefit, but they knew they were better using it.
Mm,
It's a bit of a guess game. And I guess with altitude, it's the same. Everyone knows that, well, if I don't do this, I'm probably giving up something to, I mean, hey, there's some people that it's not for. And there's certainly not many, but a few of those that are at the very highest level. But I think generally, everyone knows, look, I'm doing it and it's helping me perform better than I've ever performed. I don't really know why or how, but I just know it works. So, yeah, just not wanting to talk about it. I think it's sort
yeah,
of like one of the worst kept secrets, a bit like, ketones were for a long time in sport. And, yeah, I mean, when you're, especially if you're at the top and you're doing something helps you probably don't really want anyone else to know, especially if it makes a really big impact on your performance. Because, as I say, there's very few top performers in sport, and I mean, as you know, I'm pretty well connected all over the place,
yeah.
not just in cycling or triathlon. People just want to keep it to themselves, so
That's
that'll
right. It's the
change.
best.
That'll change.
Well, that's the best kept secret because the pros, the top level pros, are tapping into it and they're like, "Oh my gosh, we don't want everyone to find out."
Mm,
Lastly, Worthy, I want to ask you what has changed. It took you 3 years to get under the 8 hour mark in Ironman.
mm,
I say that as because now you're consistently under it. There was
yeah.
something that seriously just shifted and you became a superior athlete. Has it got to do with understanding this last sort of piece of the puzzle in terms of, yes, you had to build up the strength, the resistance. It was a new sport, but somewhere it just clicked into gear and you're now consistently that type of athlete, this top 10 athletes in the world.
Learning how to run helps a lot. Like, I used to, as you know, when I sort of started the sport, I'd sometimes swim well. I'd obviously be had quite a dominant position on the bike and was able to put myself in a position and then sort of survive. Now having a good run under me, even if I have a bad swim or a bad bike, I can still knock out a
Yeah.
good run and keep myself under 8 hours. The thing about the sport nowadays, if you want to be competitive, and that's why I'm certainly going to have to make some harsh decisions about how I approach it next year to keep going in this progression. Is you can't have a weakness. You have to be really good at you have to be good at everything, and you have to be really good at one, if not two of them, because there's going to be someone that is really is really good at least two of them, and maybe okay at one of them. So yeah, the sport, I think COVID also had a big impact on the sport and the level. Everyone had all of a sudden time to train, research, and, there was obviously that era where people started to figure out more what everyone else was doing, being able to hack Strava and different, software things. I mean, I know the Norwegians said that they had a good look at what I did and were able to reverse engineer a lot of things, which is a bit of a bummer. But, I wasn't up to date with that. So, there was a big burst there. Triathlon's definitely Ironman, especially has become a huge. It's become a professional sport now. I think there was a few of us that were professional when I first came in, but now there's a lot of guys. So you have a couple of maybe really standout guys, but a bit like in cycling, you've just got a lot of guys that are very very good. That on any day, if things go
Mm.
right for them, they can be right up there. And obviously I fortunate enough to be one of them, and striving to be one of the top. But that's where all this other stuff, the attitude and the supplementation,
Mm.
really it's quite basic. Like I said, it's bicarb and creatine and
Mm.
things that we've known about for a very long time. But yeah, you kind of know if you don't get those things right nowadays, you're giving up stuff to the rest of the field. And aerodynamics, I mean, it's really, we all work hard, we all train hard like you did, Mitch. I
Mm.
mean, we all train our asses off, we all work hard. it's you start to learn it's the ones that get everything else right, all the little
Mm,
finer details, all the understanding. I mean, yeah, if you're going to go to bed, why not go to bed at 4,000 meters? Or if you're going to ride
mhm,
a time, if you're going to ride a time trial bike, why don't you close your shoulders a bit more or wear this suit? You know, it's actually not the training element anymore that is making the difference. There's probably a tiny bit there, but it's really the person that's organized and just gets all these other bits right that can add
mm.
up to significant gains and consistency in your performance, which I think is sort of where I'm getting to now.
Worthy, when you do eventually retire, who knows when that'll be? Will you be in a box altitude, you reckon, afterwards? You spoke about it. It's not only for racing professionally, it's also for longevity and just
Yeah.
feeling good.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, gosh, I'm 41 and I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm talking about still getting better. I think I want to be a spokesperson for longevity and, but life performance of longevity. So I think, it's, as I said, it's definitely going to be a thing that'll become more prevalent and more commonplace in society going forward. And I'd be very surprised, if I wasn't, using something like that for certainly a very, very long period of time. There might be a point in time where I get to where I'm incapable of using an app. but I'd say while I've got access to a phone and knowledge of technology and things like that, yeah, I would imagine that my wife and I will be wherever we're living, we'll be looking to convert a room in the house and sleeping at whatever height we want to. So yeah, I'd say that'll be something that'll certainly live past my competitive days and into just wanting to be the best I can be, as a parent for my boy as he grows up, and just in whatever I do next in life in general.
Well, Cameron Wurf, it's been great to learn about it, and I look forward to seeing the next phase.
Thanks, mate. Great to catch up.